where we started with the project a couple of years ago, and I'll give an overview, is that we looked at the informal time in school. And so it's not about the hours that children or students are taught, but it's when they have their breaks, when they move from one room to the other. So it's outside the class, the lecture hours. And that's where most students or many socialize, where they meet one another, where they make friends. And this is what we see when we look at children with special needs. This is a deaf child, but I think it's very telling. This is a child in a mainstream setting. And this is what we see a lot with children with special needs. So also autistic children, but here deaf children, no friends, no contacts, just being alone all the time. And this is a question, is this for autistic children because they want it or not? The main question is, do they feel welcome in this project? Because very often in the literature it says, oh, but it's a lack of social motivation. That's what the autistic children want. They don't want to be with others. Or you can also think maybe it's a negative choice, that it's so unpleasant to be with others. Maybe that's why they prefer not to be with others and be alone. But when we look at the literature, we do see that high school students with autism do report more loneliness. So that really defutes the hypothesis that it's a lack of social motivation. That's, as Elijah would say, I think, clear nonsense. So we moved from the traditional perspective in psychology, in child psychology and psychiatry, and which is usually focused on the child and thinking, oh, the child has no connections, the child goes to school and doesn't feel welcome, or the pupil, the student. Let's help this person. Let's do a social skills training. Maybe then he or she fits in, or an anti-bully program. But we thought, no, let's do it differently. And that's why we started this whole research line. And we really wanted to focus on the environment and respecting the child for how he or she is and how he or she wants to be. So instead of trying to change the child, we thought, no, let's focus on changing the environment. And we started out with the social level. We focused on peers, on parents, on the professionals, the teachers. But we also looked at it because Alexander came to me, it was really because he approached me. And he says, oh, you should also look at the built environment. I think that's very important because differences in the built environment can really affect people. And I thought, okay, let's do it. Let's include it. I didn't have high hopes, I have to say, but that changed over the last couple of years. So we did some focus groups with autistic youth. We interviewed them. How is it for you to go to school? None of them had friends in school. Some of them reported stomach aches already at Sunday night, going to school the next day. All of them reported that they felt uncomfortable being alone every day in school. And some of them made up activities like going to the next classroom during breaks. So they would not appear to be that child alone, but they tried to make it look like it was their own free choice. So they would be drawing or doing some solitary activity to hide the fact that they had no friends and no one to talk to. So overall, we can say, based on these focus groups, and this is mainstream education, they felt no sense of belonging. But they also had a lot of problems with the physical environment. They had no idea. They were scared sometimes to go to the school building, to go over the schoolyard, to walk the schoolyard. The hallways were too crowded, too noisy. They couldn't get to their lockers. No places in the canteen when it was break time. So all in all, what we saw was, oh, whoa, it's really the built environment that makes it impossible for these autistic children or youth to go to school and socialize. And many of them, they reported they were already over-aroused going to their classes, taking their classes. So the break time was really the time to calm down and not be in such a busy environment. But that wasn't. We had another study, so this is over the last couple of years, that it showed the built environment really here is the main problem. We asked 200 parents through the NAR, the Nationaal Autisme Register, with the Free University, Sander Begeer. And we saw family fact and what contributes to school participation for autistic pupils, and 200 parents filled out these questionnaires that we presented them with. Family factors did not affect this. Pupil factors did not affect this. Of the school factors, only the physical environment, so again, the built environment, contributed significantly to school participation of autistic pupils. So again, unexpected for me when we started this 7 years ago, again, the built environment came out. And this is basically what we find again and again in our studies. It's consistently the built environment that really forces children to, or creates an invisible barrier for these children to feel comfortable in school and feel that they belong there, and let alone socialize with others if you're not even feeling comfortable in the whole building already. We developed for this project sensor data, and where you can measure how children interact one-to-one. And so you can make social networks during their break time. This is also what we want to do now in high school. We did it a lot at elementary school. And here you see some different classes and different roles of teachers. You can see on the right side, the teachers are very actively involved with the children in the class. Whereas on the left side, the first picture, the three teachers are just chatting with one another, the three yellow dots, and the children are playing together. And most likely these are older children, of course, compared to the last graph, where it's most likely younger children. And we use this kind of data and see how children were doing in their class. And this is a special school for special education, not mainstream, and we saw no differences between children with autism, autistic children, and non-autistic children in terms of how often, how many different children they played, with how much interaction time they had on average, how much did they interact with other children during their break time, or how central they were. This was all similar between autistic and non-autistic children. This is a special school, so half of the children had autism, which also makes it, of course, better, because then you're not a majority. And we saw that the interaction time, so measured with the sensor data, was important for the autistic children, for the non-autistic children, to feel less lonely. So non-autistic children, if they had more interaction time during their breaks with other children, they felt less lonely in school. Not autistic children, it didn't matter the interaction time, but for them it was important if they were liked by their peers. If they had a peer that liked them and wanted to play with them, then they felt less lonely. So this means that autistic children have different needs, and very often this is overlooked. They don't need to socialize all the time with others, but they just want to know, if I come, I'm welcome. And that's very different. Now here, just one slide. We haven't written this up yet, but find the deaf child. And you can see the deaf child's very separate from the rest of the class. But again, this is the built environment, because if we looked at the videos of this recording of this network, this playground, there were huge walls, and this deaf child couldn't hear anything because of the bad acoustics. So again, it's the built environment that causes this social isolation. And so that's why we now wrote this new grant, involves architecture, gave it a really more central position. And when we were interviewed, the interview committee of MWO, they said, oh, but that's what you think, the built environment. And we said, no, we've done all this research over the last 5 years. We didn't think this would be so important, but again and again, that's what we find. And so basically we can, I think, safely conclude, and Elijah and Magda are gonna talk more about that many school environments are simply unsuitable for autistic pupils to go to school. And so from a psychology point of view, I think we have to, and from an educational point of view, we really have to watch out for victim blaming, putting the blame, the burden on the autistic children, because it's like asking a child in a wheelchair going to a school with stairs. It's impossible. And also, I think it's really important, or we think that we need to take into account, what is it the autistic children want? What are their needs? And what is it they want to go to school for? So basically, equity means equal rights and not necessarily the same desires. So it's not one size fits all. And I think that's my presentation. This is the future. This is the whole team, and I'm sure there's not everyone on it, and not all organizations are on it, but basically here's a large part of the team so far from the studies I've been showing.